Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. If you think you've heard every twist a betrayal can take, trust me, this one's different. Don't move, he said. He was standing in the doorway, holding nothing but a grocery bag and an expression I couldn't decode. Not rage. Not sadness. It was something worse, stillness. That kind of eerie calm you only see before a storm that ruins entire cities. I didn't say anything. He took one step forward, placed the grocery bag on the table, and looked at me like I was a stranger who had broken into his life. Not a wife. Not a partner. Just someone who didn't belong in his house anymore. And beside me? The man who really didn't belong in his house. He grabbed his pants off the floor like he could make himself invisible if he just moved fast enough. Coward. He didn't even look at my husband, not once. He was already halfway down the stairs, muttering something like, "I didn't know she was married," as if that erased anything. My husband didn't follow him. He didn't yell. He didn't slam the door behind him. Instead, he walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and asked me this. How long? That's it. Not why, not who, not how could you. Just, how long? And I stood there, naked under a blanket, trying to figure out how silence could be louder than a scream. When I didn't answer, he nodded, like he expected that. Like he had already rehearsed my silence in his head 100 times before today. Then he pulled out his phone. I thought he was going to call someone, his brother, a friend, maybe even my mom. But instead, he played a video. And my blood froze. Because it was me, 2 nights ago, saying things I didn't even remember saying. Laughing. Moaning. Whispering a name that wasn't his. And then he said. I just wanted to see if you'd lie to my face before I left. Left? I tried to speak. I really did. My throat burned with words I never said when it mattered. But he walked past me, grabbed a packed duffel bag from the hallway, and headed to the front door. Before he stepped out, he paused. He didn't turn around. He just said. I'm not angry. I just finally believe you're not who I thought you were. And then the door closed. Not with a slam. Not with a bang. Just a quiet click that shattered everything I thought was unbreakable. And that was only the beginning. The moment that door closed behind him, I stood in the silence he left behind, waiting for the world to restart. But it didn't. No ringing phone. No angry yelling. No sound of a car peeling out of the driveway. Just silence and the faint buzz of the refrigerator. And the sick feeling in my gut that I had just watched my life walk out on me. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself like it could protect me from everything I'd just torn apart, then sat down at the edge of the bed, the same bed he'd made that morning like he always did, with those neat military corners I used to tease him about. I suddenly couldn't stop looking at the pillow on his side. Still perfect. Still untouched. Like he knew he wouldn't be coming back. I tried calling him. Twice. Straight to voicemail. I texted him, too, some pathetic thing like, "Please come back. Can we talk?" He didn't respond. I didn't really expect him to. What was I going to say? That I panicked? That it was just a moment of weakness? That I didn't mean to? But the worst part wasn't that he left. The worst part was realizing, he knew before he walked in. That video he played. The one of me and my friend. That wasn't something he'd accidentally found. He'd set it up. He'd placed a camera. He'd planned for this, and he gave me a chance to tell the truth. And I didn't. I lied by omission. I lied with silence. That night, I wandered around the house like a ghost, touching things that used to feel warm and now just felt staged. I opened the kitchen cabinet and saw the half-full jar of his favorite instant coffee. He always joked it tasted like chemicals, but he loved it anyway. I looked at the dog leash still hanging on the hook, the laundry he folded just 3 days ago, the stupid sticky note he'd left on the fridge that said, "Buy bananas or face the consequences." I cried like someone had died. Because in a way, someone had, the version of me that was still his wife. The next morning, I woke up to a message from our joint bank app, shared account access revoked. A few minutes later, another one. Joint savings closed. Balance transferred. And then I opened my email and saw it, a confirmation from a moving company. A storage unit. A P.O. box. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to give me a chance to explain. He had already made the decision days ago. I was just the last person to know. But that wasn't even the most humiliating part. No, that came 2 days later, when I went to the grocery store to buy eggs and a stranger looked at me like I was scum. "Hope it was worth it," he muttered as he passed me in the parking lot. I didn't know who he was. I'd never seen him before. And that's when I realized. My husband hadn't just walked away quietly. He'd told people. But not in a vengeful, bitter way, no, that would have been easier. He did something worse. Something far more painful. He shared the truth. And he didn't need to say much. Because the truth told itself. And suddenly, I was the stranger in our small town. The woman who blew up her marriage. The one who didn't even fight for him until it was already too late. And what he did next. I didn't think it could break me more than it already had. I was wrong. I thought silence would be the worst part. But I was wrong. What hurt more was the precision. The way he removed me from our life together as if I were a stain being scrubbed off tile. Not violently. Not emotionally. Just methodically. Like he had rehearsed it. It started with the bank accounts. That was just the beginning. He didn't touch my personal one, he didn't have to. He knew I barely used it. But our joint accounts, the savings we built together, the travel fund for the trip to Portland we'd never take, gone. Not stolen. Just, moved. He left me with what was mine, and he took only what was his. Except now I wasn't sure what was mine anymore. Then came the house. I received a letter from a law office. Not an angry message. No threats. No accusations. Just a quiet notice. He'd filed to remove my name from the deed. He wasn't kicking me out, not yet, but he'd started the process. For future clarity, the letter said. Future clarity. What a polite way to say, you don't belong here anymore. But what completely shattered me was what I found in the attic 2 nights later. I went up there looking for a box of winter clothes. I wasn't sleeping anyway, and I figured I might as well organize something. But as I pushed aside the old bins and dusty holiday lights, I saw a large cardboard box I didn't recognize. Taped shut. Marked with one word in his handwriting, before. Curiosity clawed at me. I pulled it toward the light and opened it. Inside, were memories I didn't know he had kept. Photos of us from our first year together. Concert tickets. Birthday cards I barely remembered writing. A napkin with lipstick from our anniversary dinner in 2015. An old hoodie of mine that he used to steal when I was away for work. A silly sketch I once drew of us in stick figures. He had saved all of it. But none of it was displayed anymore. He had packed it up before he confronted me. Before he left. Before he even asked how long. He knew. And it wasn't just that he knew. He had already started grieving the end of us before I ever admitted it to myself. The realization hit like a truck. He had already said goodbye, while I was still pretending I had a choice. I sat on the attic floor holding a photo of us at the beach, one he had taken of me laughing while the wind tangled my hair. I used to think that was my favorite photo. But now it felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone better. Someone he used to love. And then the calls started. Not from him. Never from him. But from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A college friend messaged me out of nowhere with a short, painful text. I heard. "I'm sorry. Didn't think you were that kind of person." My cousin Anna, who adored him, blocked me on everything. Even my boss pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home, in that careful tone people use when they already know it isn't. That's when it finally hit me. He wasn't lashing out. He wasn't destroying my life. He was just letting the truth breathe. He didn't have to post anything. He didn't scream. He didn't slander me. He didn't need to. Because the truth, once it escapes, grows legs. And suddenly, I wasn't just a woman who cheated. I was the woman who cheated on him, the kindest man half this town had ever known. The man who fixed people's roofs after storms. The man who brought pies to his elderly neighbor. The man who never raised his voice but always remembered birthdays. And now, I was the one who broke him. Only, he didn't break. He disappeared. He erased me from the frame. And somehow, that was worse than any explosion. But I wasn't done hurting yet. Not even close. Because just when I thought I'd already lost everything, I opened our email account and saw the flight confirmation. His. One way. Out of state. And guess who he was going to see? I clicked the email 4 times before my brain even processed what I was looking at. It was a forwarded itinerary from our shared email account. The one we used for booking vacations, vet appointments, last-minute takeout orders. Now it was just a graveyard of forgotten plans and broken routines. But this email wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. A one-way flight. No return. Departure, next Thursday. Destination, Santa Rosa, California. And under, passenger name, A. Whitlock, his name. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking at the top like it was mocking me for being too slow to keep up. I felt like the walls of the room were shrinking in, collapsing into the very question I was too afraid to form: why Santa Rosa? Who's there? Then my stomach dropped. Because I remembered. My husband's old friend. Harper. He hadn't seen her in years, not since college, not since before we got married. I used to tease him about her because she was always too nice, too insightful, too perfectly intuitive about his feelings. The kind of woman who looked at you and seemed to know what secrets you were keeping, and the kind of woman who made me feel small. And before I ever had the courage to call it what it was, I had always been afraid of her. Because she saw him. In ways I never truly did. They'd fallen out of touch after he and I got serious. He said they'd grown distant naturally, and I believed him, because I needed to believe I wasn't competing with someone like her. But now, here he was, flying across the country, bags packed, house severed, accounts closed, and no intention of returning. It didn't take a genius to see the truth. He wasn't just leaving. He was starting over, with someone who remembered the version of him before I shattered it. I wanted to scream. Cry. Break something. But nothing came out. I just sat there, holding my phone in one hand and gripping the kitchen counter with the other, breathing like I was trying not to drown. I sent him a message. Just 4 words: "Are you going to her?" He didn't reply. Not for hours. And then, just after midnight, he texted back. "I'm going where I feel like myself again." I threw the phone across the room. That vague, almost poetic line hit me harder than any insult could have. Because it told me everything. With me, he had become someone he didn't recognize. Someone he didn't like. And now, he was chasing the pieces of himself I had helped destroy. The next day, I found out that he'd been planning the move for longer than I imagined. The landlord texted me, saying he'd come by to remove his name from the lease on our storage unit. Our dentist called to confirm he transferred his records to a clinic in California. Even the dog, Franklin, had a new vet scheduled. In Santa Rosa. He was taking Franklin. I hadn't even noticed the leash was gone. That gutted me in ways I didn't know were possible. Franklin wasn't just a dog. He was ours. Our first real commitment, our little chaos machine, the glue that often kept us talking when things got tense. But my husband had already made the quiet choice, he wasn't leaving behind anything that reminded him of me. And just when I thought the ache couldn't go deeper, it did. I found the notebook. He'd left it in the back of the bedroom closet, tucked behind a stack of books he never finished. A spiral-bound notebook, nothing fancy, just pages scribbled in his careful, blocky handwriting. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't some dramatic manifesto. It was a checklist. A leaving list. Each item was dated. Separate accounts. Record proof, saved to cloud. Consult Harper, May 12th. Book flight, leave house by July 28th. Don't say a word unless she asks. I stared at that last one for a long time. Don't say a word unless she asks. He gave me a chance. He gave me dozens of them. Quiet ones. Subtle ones. Looks. Pauses. Soft sighs at the dinner table. Invitations to open up, to confess, to be honest, to fix it. And I never asked. So he never told. He just planned. And now, he was gone. And I wasn't mourning a breakup anymore, I was mourning the loss of a man who had outgrown the idea of ever needing me again. I didn't know what I was going to say. I hadn't even planned to dial her number. But one night, 2 days before his flight, I found myself outside on the porch in nothing but a sweater and socks, hands trembling in the cold Indiana wind, phone pressed to my ear. And then she picked up. Hello. Her voice was exactly the same, soft, calm, a little smoky like she'd just woken up, even though it was the middle of the afternoon in California. I didn't speak right away. I think part of me was waiting for her to hang up or ask who it was. But she didn't. She just waited. Like she knew. So I said it. This is Deanna. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that didn't make any sense at first. I'm sorry he had to find out the way he did. That sentence. That one sentence cracked something in me. Because I realized in that moment, Harper had known. Not just about the affair, but about everything. About our marriage. About the silence in our home. About the way I had pulled away without even realizing it. About the distance I had created and refused to acknowledge. He had confided in her before I ever knew there was a need to fight for him. And worse. She didn't sound smug. She didn't sound triumphant. She sounded sad. I never encouraged him to leave you, she continued. I only listened. I've been listening for years. I didn't know whether to thank her or scream. You waited for this, didn't you? I snapped. You waited for me to screw it up so you could finally have him. And her reply was so calm, so disarming, that I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. No, Deanna. I waited for him to stop believing you'd change. That stunned me into silence. Not because it was cruel. But because it wasn't. Because it was true. He had waited. For years. Through emotional shutdowns, missed anniversaries, distracted glances at dinner, cold shoulders in bed, and the quiet ache of being invisible to someone he loved. And I hadn't cheated because I wanted someone else, I had cheated because I thought he'd never leave. And Harper had simply been there. Not chasing him. Not manipulating him. Just, existing in the space where I no longer did. I'm not calling to ask you to stay away, I said finally. I know it's too late for that. I just needed to know if it was real. If he actually chose you. She didn't gloat. She didn't brag. She just said, he didn't choose me. He chose peace. If I'm part of that, I'm grateful. But this wasn't about me. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I wanted to hate her. I needed to. But I couldn't. Because she hadn't stolen him. She'd simply opened the door when I locked him out. That night, I didn't sleep. I just walked around the house like it was a museum of someone else's life. I stood in the hallway where we once hung photos from every vacation, all taken down now. I walked past the office where his chair used to creak when he worked late into the night, his headphones on, his leg bouncing to whatever song he had stuck in his head. I sat in the bathroom staring at my reflection, and I didn't recognize the woman who looked back at me. I had made mistake after mistake, taken his silence as forgiveness, and interpreted his gentleness as weakness. But now, I saw it clearly, he hadn't been weak. He'd been waiting. Until he wasn't. And then came the letter. No stamp. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper pushed through the mail slot early the next morning. It was short. 3 lines. I'm not angry. I just finally realized love isn't supposed to feel like holding my breath. Take care of yourself. No name. No signature. Just closure. It hit harder than any shouting match ever could have. But the worst part? It was kind. He still couldn't hurt me, not even now. And that mercy made the guilt unbearable. He was leaving in less than 48 hours. I had 2 days left to try something, anything, even if it was hopeless. So I packed a bag. Not for me. For him. The hoodie he forgot. His grandfather's watch he never wore but kept anyway. A photograph of him and Franklin at the lake. And one last letter, one I knew he might never read. I didn't know where I'd go. Or if I'd even get to him in time. But I couldn't let him leave without hearing the real truth. Even if it was too late. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat there on the living room floor with the duffel bag beside me, rehearsing 1,000 different versions of what I'd say when I saw him again. Some of them were tearful. Some were defensive. A few were just silence while I stood there, waiting for him to look at me the way he used to. I didn't even know if he'd agree to see me. I just knew that I couldn't live with the final image being that quiet goodbye in our kitchen, when I stood frozen in a blanket and he walked out without raising his voice. By sunrise, I was already in the car. I didn't bother texting him. If he saw my name on his screen, he probably wouldn't have answered anyway. But I had to try. I had to do something, even if it made me look desperate. Even if it wouldn't change a thing. The airport was 2 hours away. I drove without music. Without coffee. Just the sound of the tires on the asphalt and the chaos inside my head. Every red light felt like it was taunting me, whispering you're already too late. But somehow, I made it. Barely. I sprinted through the terminal like a lunatic, hair a mess, makeup smudged from tears I hadn't even realized were still falling. I knew the flight number. I knew the gate. And when I finally reached it, panting and wide-eyed, I saw him. Standing there. Back turned. Franklin's leash in one hand. A small backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. I stopped 5 feet behind him, unsure of what to do. Should I call his name? Should I just leave the bag and go? Should I break down and beg? Before I could decide, he turned, like he had felt me arrive. And the way his eyes landed on me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was acceptance. Like he had already mourned me. Like I was just a chapter he had already read to the end. I didn't expect you to come, he said softly. My mouth was dry. I held up the bag, suddenly feeling stupid for thinking it would matter. I wanted to give you this. You forgot your watch. And I put in a couple other things. Just stuff I thought you might want. He took the bag, nodding. Thanks. There was a silence between us then. Not cold, but heavy. Like we were both standing at the edge of something neither of us could cross anymore. "I read your letter," he said. "The one you left in the bag." I blinked, confused. I hadn't given him the bag yet. He smiled gently. "You left it on the porch last night. I picked it up this morning before heading out." My heart sank. He already knew what I'd written. He'd already read everything I had planned to say. "So you knew I might come," I said. He nodded once. "I hoped you wouldn't." That hit me like a slap. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He wasn't angry. He just didn't want this moment. He didn't want me to try to fix it. He didn't want me to unravel again in front of him. He had already healed the part of him that needed closure. But I couldn't walk away yet. Not without saying something that came from my voice and not a folded piece of paper. "I just need to ask you one thing," I said, stepping closer. "Do you love her?" He didn't answer right away. He looked down at Franklin, who wagged his tail gently, then back at me. "I don't know," he said. "But when I talk to her, I feel like I'm allowed to be who I am. I don't feel like I have to earn space." That broke something in me I hadn't realized was still intact. Not because he chose her. But because he no longer needed me to feel whole. "I was selfish," I whispered. He didn't deny it. He didn't comfort me either. He just looked at me, really looked, and said, "You were scared. You stopped believing I'd stay, so you made sure I wouldn't. And I let you, for a long time. That's on me too." The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. He shifted the strap of the bag on his shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Dee." He only called me that when he was serious. And then he turned, walked toward the gate, and didn't look back. No dramatic farewell. No tears. Just a man who had made peace with the pain, and decided not to carry it anymore. I stood there for a long time, watching the plane taxi away through the glass, wondering how long it would take for this emptiness to settle into something I could live with. And what came next wasn't silence. It was consequence. The house was so quiet after the airport that I started leaving the TV on in every room just to hear voices. Not even shows I liked, mostly reruns, old documentaries, static-filled cooking shows I never watched. Anything to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. The bed felt too big. The kitchen too empty. Even the dog bowls were gone, and I'd catch myself stepping around them like they were still there. Muscle memory didn't know he was gone yet, but the rest of me did. It's funny. You think the worst part of a breakup is the moment they walk away. But it's not. It's the day after. The moment you realize they're not just gone, they're not coming back. No more texts. No calls. No shared passwords. No one asking if you want anything from the store. Just a hole in your routine that echoes every time you reach for someone who isn't there. I went back to work after 3 days. I didn't want to, but the bills were still mine, and life doesn't stop because your heart fell out of your chest. People at the office were polite. Too polite. Everyone looked at me with that mix of pity and restrained curiosity, the way you'd look at a car accident you're trying not to stare at. Only one person asked. My supervisor, Janet, pulled me aside after our Monday staff meeting. She didn't ask what happened, she asked, "Are you safe?" It hit me like a gut punch. Because I realized then that he had told no one the details. Not even after everything I'd done. He'd left without dragging me through the mud. The whispers floating around were shaped entirely by assumption, and yet he protected me from the worst of them. Even in his absence, he was still kinder than I deserved. And I was unraveling. The nights got darker. My appetite vanished. My voicemail filled up with ignored messages, bill reminders, my mom, a couple of friends who hadn't heard from me in a while and were starting to worry. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face anyone. Then, 2 weeks after he left, the doorbell rang. It was 6:42 p.m. I remember that exactly because I was sitting on the floor, eating cereal out of the box, wearing the same hoodie I'd slept in for 3 nights straight. I figured it was a delivery. I hadn't ordered anything, but lately, boxes had started showing up from companies I didn't recognize, insurance documents, legal notifications, even one marked address correction pending. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a package. It was her. Harper. Standing on my porch. Alone. Holding a small envelope in one hand and a look on her face that I couldn't read. Not smug. Not triumphant. Just, tired. I froze. I know I shouldn't be here, she said, before I could say anything. I just came to give you this. She handed me the envelope and stepped back. What is it? I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. I don't know, she admitted. He wrote it before he left. Told me not to read it. Told me to give it to you when I thought you were ready. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was beautiful, yes. But not flawless. Not glowing like the fantasy I had built up in my head. She looked human. A little broken. Maybe even afraid. Why now? I asked. Because, he hasn't called me, she whispered. Not once since he landed. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? I mean I don't know where he's staying. I don't know who he's with. He gave me that letter, hugged me goodbye, and vanished. Like he needed us both to believe something different before he left for good. I didn't know what to say. Neither did she. She just added, whatever's in that letter, it's yours now. Then she turned and walked away. I stood in the doorway, heart hammering, envelope shaking in my hand like it might explode. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No, dear. No, sincerely. Just this. I forgave you the moment I knew. I left not because of what you did. But because of who I became while trying to be enough for you. Please don't spend the rest of your life apologizing to a ghost. No name. No signature. Just the truth. And with that, I knew. He didn't just walk away from me. He walked away from everything. Her. This town. The person he had become trying to hold us all together. And now I had to decide what to do with the pieces he left behind. I read the letter over and over again, not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I needed to believe it was real. That someone I hurt so deeply could still choose grace. Not anger. Not revenge. Just freedom. I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not to forget. But to remember, not just what I'd lost, but what I'd learned. For the first time in weeks, I stood up, took a real shower, washed the layers of guilt off my skin, and opened the windows to let the air back in. The world hadn't stopped just because I had. I started answering messages again. Returned calls. Apologized to friends I'd pushed away. Some didn't respond. Some did, cautiously. One of them, Marlene, even brought over my favorite soup and told me I looked like hell. It was the first time I laughed without crying afterward. I donated the things he didn't take. Clothes. Books. The mugs we bought on our trip to Maine that I couldn't look at anymore. I repainted the bedroom walls, not because I wanted to erase him, but because I wanted to stop living in a mausoleum of what-ifs. I began to write. Nothing public. Just for me. Letters I'd never send. Pages of truth I never said out loud. I wrote about the woman I used to be, and the woman I wanted to become. Not for him. Not to win him back. But because I finally saw her clearly, buried under years of avoidance and fear. And somewhere in all of that, the grief began to change. It stopped being sharp. It stopped screaming. It started becoming, still. I never heard from him again. No phone call. No update. No trace. Harper messaged me once, just to say he'd left California too. No forwarding address. No destination. Just a man chasing quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt peace for him. Genuine, quiet peace. Months passed. Then a year. And one morning, I woke up, took a deep breath, and realized something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I was okay. Not fixed. Not perfect. But whole. Because he was right, I couldn't keep apologizing to a ghost. I had to choose to live, even with the scars. And as strange as it sounds, I'm grateful. Grateful he caught me. Grateful he didn't scream. Grateful he walked away before I destroyed even more of him. Because in losing him, I found a version of myself I might actually like someday. Maybe he's out there now, drinking coffee on a quiet porch, watching the sunrise with Franklin at his feet. And maybe, wherever he is, he finally feels free. Thank you for listening to this story on Reddit Confessions. Now we want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest, and have you ever experienced a turning point that changed your life like that? Leave a comment below, your experience might help someone else going through the same thing. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time.